NACL today. If you are an elected official and you're not seated up here, you can do that. We would encourage and ask that you come on and sit with us up here. So if you would do that. We have 4 items, actually 3 presentations today by different folks, 4 pieces of model legislation that we're going to discuss. My goal is to get us out of here exactly at 10:30, so everybody be mindful of that. I would like to say, as a matter of personal and a point of personal privilege, I'm from the state of North Carolina, and I would be remiss if I did not tell you, each and every one of you, how many states have come to North Carolina in the wake of Hurricane Helene to help our western neighbors. I live in the western part of the state, not quite in the area that was devastated, but I have seen, and my wife Patty has seen firsthand, a flood in biblical proportions. It was not a 500-year flood, it was a 5,000-year flood. Nothing like I've ever seen in my life. And I want to personally thank each and every one of you, your states. I know every state in the country, I believe, has come to help North Carolina and the other states that were affected as well. And I just want to thank you for that, because it's been the Christian community of churches and nonprofits and others that have really carried the day in the wake of that disaster. So I would be remiss if I did not mention that. Thank you. Okay, so we have two presenters and 1 bill sponsor for religious release time legislation. And I'm going to call upon Cody Balsh of LifeWise Academy, and then Matthew Faraci, I believe, is that the pronunciation? All right. He is executive
Sorry, I said
producer.
That's amazing. You got it.
All right. So this means I get like a guest spot in The Chosen? Is that because I can pronounce the words?
Yeah, we'll take care of you.
Yeah. This is my best side. Okay. And then Representative Doug Bankson will actually do the presentation of the legislation. But we're going to first hear from Cody Balsh, and if you would, go ahead, sir.
Thank you. I'd like to start by just thanking Senator Rapert and the NACL Education Committee for having me here today. Seth, if we could switch on over to that presentation. We're going to be talking about release time religious instruction. I thought I'd start by just introducing myself. My name is Cody Balch, and I'm the Senior Director of Statewide Initiatives for LifeWise Academy. But I thought I would start by just showing you a bit of my world back home in Columbus, Ohio, with my wife and 4 kids. And they are a wonderful gift. And I thought I'd bring a smile to your face as we start this off this morning. But I am honored to be able to speak to you on this critical topic of release time religious instruction. And some of you may be incredibly familiar with that, and some of you may not have heard of that, because it is something that has flown under the radar. It is something that many people do not know about. It's a legal term, and it is something that we believe is the greatest opportunity to impact future generations in our country. In fact, we believe it is one of the greatest missed opportunities that we have underutilized. And so I'm excited to talk to you. But as it pertains to LifeWise, I want to define it for what this means for a ministry, a program like LifeWise Academy. We provide Bible education for public school students during school hours. And you may say, wait a second, it's 2024, almost 2025. How is that possible? Because as you all know, decades ago, our nation systematically sought out to remove Bible education from the public schools. But we believe that with release time religious instruction, we have a viable pathway to reinstall it. And I've underlined these 3 words here, during school hours, because they are critical in terms of the strategic opportunity that we believe that this uniquely provides to impact our nation from coast to coast. So today I want to just start by covering what is release time, just diving a little bit more in that. I know I give you a high-level view. And then really applying that in a case study of LifeWise and our story of LifeWise and how that's impactful. and then really putting it back to this legislation and why this is critical for your state. And so what is release time? Well, about the same time that Bible education was being taken out of public schools, there was a window of opportunity in the U.S. Supreme Court in a case, a little-known case from Zorich v. Clausen in 1952 that said that students can be released from public schools during school hours to receive religious instruction as long as these three criteria are met. It must be held off school property, it must be privately funded, and it must be parent permitted. But the reality is that although the Supreme Court ruled on this 70 years ago, a little over 70 years ago, it has gone largely unnoticed. We believe, based upon our research, that there's less than 1% of students taking part of this across the United States with 90 million public school students. This is something that has been very, very underutilized. We, with your help, would love to see that change. So our story, our LifeWise story, if you tell our LifeWise story, you've got to start with our forerunners, because in 2012, in Van Wert, Ohio, which happens to be the hometown of LifeWise Academy's founder and CEO, Joel Penton, but there were some wonderful people in 2012 who became aware of this and started a Release Time Religious Instruction program teaching the Bible. And very quickly, they saw that 95% participation was taking place in their public schools. Once a week, these students were being released from the school day, usually during lunch and recess, or maybe during the specials rotation. And just like they would receive library or art or music or all these different things, they were receiving Bible instruction. 450 feet, they would walk door to door off school property to receive this. And as they were just seeing this incredible impact, they came to, again, our founder and CEO, Joel Penton, and who was already running a Christian nonprofit very successfully. And they came to him with this, what they called the riddle, in 2018. And they said, Joel, if release time is legal, and it clearly is according to the Supreme Court of the United States, and if it's impactful, and we're seeing life-changing stories with 95% participation rate, then why in the world doesn't every community in our country have a release time program in their community? If we can support, if communities can support a McDonald's and a library and a YMCA and many other things, then why hasn't this become a priority? And so Joel did his research and prayed up and lost a lot of sleep thinking this. And he came back to them and he says, I believe this is our answer. He says, I believe the answer is that there are too many barriers to entry. That essentially, to do what this is, you have to do the equivalent of starting a private school. You have to figure out your facility and transportation, curriculum, staffing, technology, accounting, insurance, all these different things. And that is a heavy lift for many communities to reinvent that wheel from scratch. But what if, as I've been thinking about this, what if they didn't have to reinvent the wheel? What if we provided a plug-and-play program, basically taking what you have here in Van Wert, Ohio, and taking what you've learned and making all these things more accessible, putting it metaphorically in a box and giving it to a community saying, you can have this in your community, here's how to do it. And they said, this, Joel, that is a fantastic idea, but we don't want to do it. We think you are equipped to do that. And Joel accepted that invitation. In 2018, he linked arms with the people in Van Wert, Ohio to start what is now known as LifeWise Academy. And so they set out to put on paper, what is LifeWise Academy all about? And there's a few ways to put it, but we like to say the LifeWise philosophy are these three things. We keep it legal. We want it to be above board, following all the state laws, all the local policies, making sure that we are within the parameters that we should be. And then number two, we keep it simple. There's many facets when it comes to religion of doctrine and theology and many things that people might disagree on, but we want to be very simply focused on what is clearly taught in Scripture, primarily and most importantly, it being gospel-centered. And then thirdly, we want to keep it practical. The gospel, we believe, transforms lives and changes people's character, and schools are already investing in character education, and the Bible hits the root of how you change character. And so we want to make sure that we are pairing all of our lessons with character education from the Bible so that schools see this impact and transformation. And so that is what we sought out to do. So we began starting and expanding, and we went to Ayersville schools, and we built a custom modular classroom right through the playground. The students would leave their school, go through the playground, and go right off school property to this modular classroom and begin to receive Bible education. In the first year, they received 60% participation in just their very first year, and so much so that other neighboring schools were calling LifeWise, saying, can you please start this in our community? Because we're actually having kids and families open enroll to Ayersville because they want their children to receive Bible education. And so we absolutely began to help them in that process. So we went to Riverview schools, and the students would walk across the street to a church building just across the street. Most churches are many schools have a church within 1 mile or less of their school building. And they would set up a pop-up classroom that could be set up and tore down, didn't have to have a custom modular classroom, utilizing space that churches already had empty throughout the week, and receive Bible education. And 70% of students, public school students in the first year, were enrolled in that. Then we went to Grover Hill, and right through the parking lot, there was a 2-car garage that this community said, we want to renovate this 2-car garage into a beautiful Bible education classroom. And so students would walk over there, and 70% of students pre-registered before the school year even began, before LifeWise even kicked off. 70% of students and public school students were pre-registered there at Grover Hill. Then we deployed our very first LifeWise shuttle bus in Pandora, Ohio, to reach those who were not within walking distance to the facilities, churches nearby. And we were a little hesitant historically about transportation and involving that, but we said, students do this all the time. They get on and off buses. It's not a big deal. And now we have over 80% of our programs utilizing shuttle buses as a part of it. And what you can see there in Pandora, Ohio, they are now serving kindergarten through 12th grade with LifeWise Academy. Then we continue to expand even into 2021 in Mifflin Middle School in inner city Columbus. And those we started even more in inner city Columbus, even in the most the communities with the highest crime rate. And it was well received. It was impactful. It was needed. And this was an incredible. We set out a goal to serve 25 schools by year 2025. We haven't hit 2025 yet, but we quickly expanded to out of state, out of Ohio, into suburban communities, and we were serving 36 schools by year 2021. We already blew that out of the water, so we said we're not very good at setting goals. So let's go back to the drawing board, and we said, what if by 2026 we were serving 1,000 schools? And think about that. We went from 25 schools in 2025. We blew that out of the water in less than a year, to 1,000 schools in 2026. Let me tell you where we're at. As you can see there, in 2021, we were at 36. Well, to keep pace with that goal of 1,000 schools, you've got to hit 84 schools in 2022, 200 in 2023, and 425 this year, in this school year. And I'm happy to report that we are already serving over 630 schools across 31 states. Thank you. Thank you. And we give God all the glory. This is something that you can tell we did not do. The Lord is behind this. And I pray that you are as well. What we see here, we show you these stats not to impress you, but to let you know that this is possible. Because there are people who said, it's been 70 years and this hasn't happened. What makes you think? What makes you think that it's going to happen now? And this shows that from coast to coast, from New York to California, even LA County, from Alaska to Florida, from suburban communities to rural communities to inner city communities, they are all receiving and showing that Bible education through Release Time Religious Instruction is possible. And I want to show you these stats because it's not just that. These schools represent students who are receiving Bible education and the gospel that changes and transforms lives and future generations, that their kids may come to know who Jesus is. That many students are going home and telling their parents, that many of these students do not already have a church home. They do not know the scriptures. They do not know the gospel, yet their parents want them to grow up to be good and well-rounded, and yet they're coming in and hearing the gospel and being transformed. This is impactful It is needed. And I just, to double down on even this impact, we survey educators each year. And you can see here that 769 educators say overwhelmingly that this is impacting positively their students. You go to parents and it's just silly. It's laughable. It's like a unanimous, parents are saying, this is helping my child. Then you take a third party study and they're saying by year one, if you have Bible education in your school, by year one, school attendance improves. Year 2 and 3, school suspensions and out-of-school suspensions decline and go down. And by year 4, the academic performance improves. I mean, there should be no surprise that Bible education has such an impact on people's lives, on students' lives. And so how does this pertain to your state? Why does this matter for us today? It matters greatly. I want to show you a map that shows where the current laws are at. This is really, really important for us to understand legislatively. So to do this briefly, I'm going to briefly lump the gray and the yellow states together. Why? The yellow states have release time religious instruction laws on the books, but they are may states, which say that school boards may allow it but do not have to. And the gray states have no legislation. So functionally, they function very similarly, the gray and the yellow states, even though there's laws on the books for one and not the other. Because a school board could, even parents come and say, we'd like this. School boards can say, no thanks, we don't want this. The red states are where there is shall language in this release time religious instruction laws. And that means that if parents come and say, we want this for my child, for my public school student, schools say, yes, we will allow that. Obviously, we must allow that. We shall allow that. And then they work with the school on how to make that possible. This is game changer. I'll take Indiana as an example. And all the little black stars there, the little stars, are where LifeWise, those 31 states where LifeWise is already active. But in Indiana is a great example because just a few months ago in the summer, they were a may state. And they passed shall language in their legislature. And in just a short time, they've quadrupled their LifeWise programs, and they're already serving over 70 schools in Indiana. And so you can just see how that quadrupled so fast just by going from may to shall, or no law to shall, and how this is impactful. We have model legislation that we worked with incredible groups such as ADF and First Liberty to put together this model legislation. And we want to make this accessible to you. So rtri.net is where it's most easily accessible. You can scan this QR code if that's the way you function. But write down rtri.net or see us at our booth out there. And we'd love to answer any question. I want to kind of give things back. I don't know if you want to pass it to Matthew, but I'll be happy to take questions whenever that time comes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that very inspiring presentation there. And I think what we will do is hold some questions until the very end of the presentations. And at this particular time, I'll recognize Mr. Faraci to discuss the topic.
Yeah, I just wanted to, first of all, just make a brief comment. As you can tell, I'm a little bit into storytelling. And one thing that a lot of people don't know about those of us in the Jewish community that are religious, as we say, is that your average Jewish parent will sacrifice literally everything to make sure that their kids are exposed to the Bible. I have so many friends who they have a terrible house, their cars are awful, because all the money that they spend is going to their Jewish day school to make sure that their kids are studying with the best rabbis. Why? Because the only reason we're here after 3,000 something years, besides obviously that miracle, is because it is in our soul that we have to pass on the knowledge of the Torah to the next generation. That's like the number one job. That is our job. And obviously, as you know, the Bible says, as a light to the nations, we have to pass the Bible on to the world. So why do I say that? Because America has gotten into the mess that it's in because we stopped telling our story. And as a Jew, I'm very proud to say that America is a Christian nation that is tolerant of other religions. You can do both, right? So trust me, we've had it better here than any other country in the world, with the exception of Israel. It's pretty great. But, and that's because America is a Christian country. That's why. And I'm proud to say that. So I don't know why people run away from that. And so why is America in this situation? Because it's forgotten that that's what it is. And that's what it's built on. It's forgotten its operating system, if you will. And so that's why we see this release time programs as so significant. So what we're working on, and by the way, I want to thank Jason who caught this vision in about 38 seconds. I told Jason what we were doing, and he looked at me. You know, Jason's like super smart, and he was like, "I'm in." I just didn't realize "I'm in" meant like let's go change the world in 38 seconds. That's why I love him. So he's a closet Jew. So if you look at the map, what we're working on is a national strategy to get bills passed as quickly as possible. Now, let me just clarify why we need the bills passed so you guys all know. As Cody alluded to, the Supreme Court already said it's kosher. We can do this. But you get, first of all, you get a combination of things. You get well-meaning people, let's say in rural school districts, that they'll start a program in the school. Can't do that. Or, you know, various other things. The you know, in Oklahoma, the two people from the Freedom from Religion Foundation start suing people, right? So what this bill really is, and it's been carefully crafted by our friends at the Alliance Defending Freedom with input from all kinds of other people, and it can be customized per state, of course. But what the bill really is it's guidelines to say, okay, here, we already know it's legal, but here's how you do it in the right way so that you won't get sued. We just want to protect the parents and the schools and the teachers that are participating. The other really key little word thing is two words, may versus shall. So I'm just going to give you a line from the 10 Commandments and see what you think. Thou may not kill. Doesn't really work, right? Especially, you know, if you live in some of these dangerous places in the world, I think they'd take the may option very quickly. So thou shall not kill, much more definitive. So there are, if you look at these states that are yellow, that say schools may allow, what that means is that the parents could actually go to a school in which the Supreme Court has already said you can do this, and the school can say, nah, we're not into that. We don't like that. We don't care what the parents think. We don't want to do that. We're actually having some issues right now in Ohio, in the state of Ohio, where we're in a battle right now to get the may language changed to shall, because there's troublemakers trying to stop LifeWise programs in schools despite the fact that the parents overwhelmingly want it in their schools. And so last year in Oklahoma and in Indiana, we passed shall language. And that means literally if mom and dad show up and say, we want this in the school, you shall do it. You shall allow them to do it. And then of course the states that are no color at all, we got a lot more work to do there, but we're focused on roughly 14 different states this year, obviously open to hearing from any of you guys if you want to change our minds on some of that. But we've been looking at states that we feel like Texas is obviously a major one, Louisiana, Arkansas, Kansas, Missouri, Georgia, I think Alabama, Mississippi, Texas, I think I said Texas. And you're probably saying to me, well, why are you focused on red states? Because red states traditionally would have been okay. But as I just mentioned to you, like you can get a woke school district. If you go to Edmond, Oklahoma, you'll get a woke school district that'll tell you, no, you can't. We don't care what the parents say. We're not going to do it. So Governor Stitt, who is an amazing man, and John Echols and a couple brave leaders in Oklahoma really got that done. The other thing you guys should know, just so you know, is when these bills get passed, the establishment will come out and say all kinds of baloney about you're creating a VBS in your school, or they'll do whatever they can to try to twist what the bill actually does to confuse people so that they don't. I'm sure you guys are shocked to hear this, like truly shocked to hear this. It's like they take the simplest bill in the world and they'll just, I mean, you would not believe some of the stories we heard during the Oklahoma battle where we were like, what, where did you get that one? So it's important to get with the superintendents early and educate them about, what this is and help them understand all we're doing is actually trying to honor them and work with them and do it, in the right way. So we're being very aggressive about getting these passed as quickly as possible. We are blessed to have the support again of leaders like Jason, who's going to be giving me his sport code after this session is done. You promised, Jason. And also Tony Perkins with, as you guys know, the Family Policy Alliance, David Barton's Wallbuilders group, Alliance Defending Freedom, and frankly, any of the good guys that you guys know about, they're assisting us with getting this done. So Cody and I are so grateful to be here today, and hit us with whatever your hardest questions are. That's what we're here to answer. And thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you so much. I do think it would be good before Representative Bankson discusses the bill to allow questions specifically to the two speakers. So if any of our members around the table here have any specific questions, just raise your hand, ask to be recognized, and give your name and state of where you're from. Down here.
My name is Robert Sprague. I'm the treasurer of the state of Ohio. And first of all, I just want to thank LifeWise for the impact that they've had on tens of thousands of school-aged children here in the state of Ohio. But I was wondering if our speakers could just very briefly, maybe 60 seconds, talk about the problems that we've had with the atheists and the Marxists that are trying to force this out of the Westerville school system and many other school systems, and what the fight is for all the legislators at the table here. Because the reality is, the First Amendment to the Bill of Rights in our Constitution is not freedom of speech. The first sentence says, Congress shall establish no religion. The second sentence says, Congress shall not abridge the free exercise of religion in the United States of America. And the third sentence says you have the freedom of speech. This is so fundamental to these parents and these children, because the reality is that God chooses each person differently. And to take away the ability for parents to allow their child to attend one of these classes and learn about God's word and be close to God is something terrible that they're trying to do in these school districts. I was just wondering if you could highlight that, because it's going to be a fight, and it's come to your state if it hasn't already.
Thank you, Treasurer Sprague. I'm glad you're here, and thank you for bringing this up. There is opposition, as both Matthew and Treasurer Sprague have mentioned, and the big thing is fear. They're weaponizing fear. This is a tactic, and so to have a school board come and rescind in Westerville, Ohio, in their third year of having LifeWise, even though there was overwhelming support, but to shut down a program that had about 300 students receiving Bible education every week. This allowed and kind of trying to spread misinformation and really use fear tactics. One of the fear tactics they've used recently to help kind of stop Ohio moving from may to shall is actually at my home elementary school, the elementary school that I grew up at, Edgewood Elementary in Marysville, Ohio. And they said that, well, under release time, the Temple of Satan is going to start a release time program, and they call it Hellion Academy, and so this is a fear tactic to help really say, well, if we don't,
We're going to cast them in the chosen, just so you know.
yeah. So like if we don't want the Church of Satan in, then we might as well not let it for anybody. Is what they hope. That's their play. They have no ability to really get kids to sign up or parents signing their kids up. It's not something they plan to take actionable steps on, most likely, but it is a fear tactic. And so I think it's something you all should be very aware of, to not fall for those, and make sure that you're leading with the truth. We have a double-sided document that'd be really helpful for you. We could pick up at the booth. We have plenty of them there. Really talking points, information to make sure you have the facts in front of you. There's a model legislation. It's really best paired with this to help you, what are really the facts? And you can go from there. But feel free to ask any follow-up questions as well.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Matthew, go ahead. Say your name and state.
Matthew Gamble from Georgia, and thank you, Chairman Cody and Matthew. I appreciate your presentation today. My wife is with me, and she actually runs a LifeWise program in our hometown, Cartersville, Georgia, and started it last school year, and we now have 144 fourth and fifth grade students from Cartersville Elementary that go once a week for Bible education. So it's been an incredible... It's been an incredible journey God's provided throughout the whole time and continues to do things. But one thing that I would say is it not true? Also, one of the benefits to passing legislation, and we're working on legislation in Georgia, is just from the structure of the school superintendents. They have meetings and they talk about all of the policy changes that we make every year as a legislature in education, and they review those, and they're aware of them. But at a very basic, from a very basic standpoint, it's also a way to advertise to these school superintendents that this is a thing, and a lot of them have been interested and now have approached us on how they too can do this in their school. So, it helps to kind of put the word out for those that may not know that this is something they can do for their school system.
Well, and we need to talk to you after this about Georgia, because that's a big, major priority for us, is getting Georgia passed. So, and we'd love to sit down with you and talk about it. So, because we think Georgia's like a natural no-brainer state to do this in.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up, because the legislation helps make it more accessible, allowing the Bible education and gospel and any religious instruction to make it more accessible. But as I mentioned here, most people don't know this is a thing. Most people don't know this is even possible or legal, for that matter. Most people would think it's not legal, and it in fact is. So yes, running this legislation does do multiple things like that. Raise awareness. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And we had one more question here, and I believe that'll probably have to be it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Denise Crosswhite-Hader from Oklahoma. Would you speak to us on, you said the program's K-12 available, but what has been the most successful age? And is there a sweet spot for these time releases? Because is it better if it's the first class, last class, middle class? Just what has been successful? I think that would be helpful for most to know. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question. We tend to start new programs, doesn't have to be this way, in elementary schools, because then we grow it with those students kind of as they graduate to the next grade. Then we grow it up with them. It just seems to make a lot of sense, and it seems to be really receptive, getting into the foundation level of those students at that age. When that typically happens in the day seems to work best. The school does get to have a lot of say in that, which is great. It gets to work with their day and the curriculum and making sure that works well. But we oftentimes see it during the lunch and recess block. They eat lunch there at LifeWise and do that. And that's, again, once a week for usually less than an hour. 45 minutes to an hour. And then sometimes it's worked into the specials rotation as well. As they get older into middle school, high school, there's these study periods, there's these study blocks that tend to make that accessible already and tend to work in those spaces as they get into the older grades. So hopefully that's helpful.
But the focus is elementary school kids. That's the real focus, right?
Yeah.
So that's most of the programs are.
Yeah.
Almost all of them, right? Or
yeah,
elementary
that's
school.
As a 6-year-old organization, that's where most of these have started, is in that elementary, but then they're working into middle school, and we definitely have high schools doing this as well. So it's possible at any grade, but elementary seems to be where we put the priority, especially for starting.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, both of you, for the speakers. I'm sure there are people who have other questions, even in the audience, and I believe y'all are going to be around afterwards to talk to some of the specifics. At this particular time, I'm going to introduce Representative Doug Bankson here. If you would, to go ahead and introduce. You should have a copy of the bill in front of you, the model legislation, and I'll turn it over to Representative Bankson.
All right, thank you, Senator. And it's a privilege to present this on behalf of Senator Mark Abraham from Louisiana, who was going to be doing this, but he wasn't able to be here. So I want to just start by saying this checks all three boxes that you mentioned from the SCOTUS 52 decision. So This bill is really very succinct. There's 5 sections to it. First of all, of course, the title, you'd put your state name in there, State Release Time Education Act. But the definition is release time course means a course in religious instruction taught by an independent sponsoring entity in which a student is excused from school to attend. And school district means you would cite your law, your state definition there. But note it says this should not apply to private schools. And I know sometimes there's concerns with private schools being involved that will this affect them? But this, of course, protects them. Section 3 gets into the meat of it here. Each school district shall adopt a policy that excuses any student under its jurisdiction from school to attend a release time course for at least 1 hour per week, but not more than 5 hours per week. The policy shall include basically 7 parts here: the student, parent, or legal guardian written consent. Second, the entity sponsoring the release time course maintains attendance records, and so they're available to the school through them. Number 3, the transportation to and from, including students with disabilities, is the complete responsibility of the sponsoring entity, parent, guardian, or student. So it doesn't fall upon the public school, upon their budget to handle that. Number 4, the sponsoring entity makes provisions for and assumes liability for the student while under the control of the sponsoring entity. Next page, no school district funds other than de minimis administrative costs are expended in providing the release time course. So even in states where they're concerned or they're trying the may rather than the shall, we need to get it across that line and be that vanguard to protect the rights that they have. And this, of course, is the model legislation that NACL is putting forward. Number 6, release time courses are not to be held on school property unless permitted under a neutral policy of equal access, opening school property for use by community groups. So it leaves a little bit of an open door there rather than it cannot. Basically, if they have a policy that allows other groups, they can incorporate it there as well. And finally, number 7, the student assumes responsibility for any missed schoolwork. So this isn't an excuse to get out of other classes. Notwithstanding any law to the contrary, any period for which a student is excused to attend a release time course shall be considered as the student attending the school from which the student is excused for the purpose of determining school funding and satisfying attendance requirements. So some funding obviously depends upon the number of students being there. This will not hurt the school's funding. Sometimes that's an objection they try and bring up. And nothing in this act shall be interpreted to deny a release time course or the sponsoring entity equal access to funds, benefits, or services that the local school system may provide or make available to community groups or other independent entities. Let's go on to section 4. Again here, a school district shall adopt a policy that awards academic credit for the completion of a release time course and recognizes the credits as an independently accredited provider of release time courses. So basically, this must be treated as any other elective, the same way they would treat a secular elective. They have to treat this on the same basis. And B goes further in determining how much credit to award for a completion of such course. The school district shall evaluate the course based on purely secular criteria that are substantially to the same criteria used to evaluate similar courses for the purpose of determining how much credit the course is awarded there. The decision to award credit for the release time course shall be neutral to and shall not involve any test for religious content or denominational affiliation. So there's no fear that the school then begin to decide and determine what type of denominational structure is there. They have to give it the same weight as they would any other secular course. Under C there, for the purpose of this section, secular criteria may include, but are not limited to, the following: the number of hours of classroom instruction time, the review of the course syllabus, number 3, the methods of assessment used in the course, and finally, the qualifications of the course instructor, which shall be similar to qualifications of other teachers within the district. And finally, number 5, a right of action. So basically, any person or organization aggrieved by a violation of this act, in other words, the school saying, no, we're not going to allow you. No, you shall. And that's what we want to get across here. Anyone who is aggrieved by this, they have the right of action basically for the violation and seek appropriate relief, including but not limited to injunctive relief, monetary damages, reasonable attorney's fees, and court costs. This is both for the organization or the individual. And that's the whole of the bill there, and such a tremendous presentation. I think the bottom line is the return on investment. We always talk about that in business, but look at what it's doing to the schools. They're always asking, why in my day did kids have shotguns in the back of the pickup truck and after school go hunting and there was no thought of school shootings? We've lost the moral compass. This allows that to be restored.
And one just to add to what you're saying, it's also pro-teacher and pro-school and pro-student, right? Too often we don't come out that way, and it's like, hey, we're here to support you. So who loses in this? Nobody.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Representative Bankson. And that was a really good and very thorough presentation on that. And I think in order of time, unless there's a really burning question that you have, Representative Bankson, because I think you did a really good job explaining that, I think it would be in order to have a motion and to approve this. And if you are so inclined, make sure you state your name and state that you're from. We have a motion over here, I believe.
Delegate Rick Metzger, I make a motion, we put it forward.
All right, we have a motion for that. And do we do seconds? I think we do.
Gary Clake, Ohio.
All right, we have a motion and a second. So all in favor then of adopting this model legislation you have before you, if you would just say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign. All right, so thank you so much. The motion carries, and thank you so much. This is a tremendous presentation. We'll clear the dais now and allow the next presentations to come up. And Matthew, I will have my agent get in touch with you later on. Okay, so all right. Thank you so much. Yeah, we'll have the members. Let's see, we've got coming up next Representative Gidley and Rick Metzger from Maryland, and this presentation too. Oops. And also Dr. Mark Hall with Regent University, Andrea Justice First Liberty Institute. And we're going to do both. We'll talk about both and kind of go to the both bills simultaneously as well. All right. So we're ready to go then. Okay. So first on the agenda is Dr. Mark Hall, Regent University, to discuss the 10 Commandment posters in the public schools and the 10 Commandment monuments.
All right. Do you have my PowerPoint presentation ready to go up?
I'm sorry, what?
Do you have my PowerPoint presentation by chance?
All right.
If you don't,
Hold
that's
on.
fine. Well, let me just begin by telling you a little bit about my connection to the 10 Commandments, monuments, and displays. And then I'm going to take my 20-minute presentation and condense it to 5 minutes. I'm going to try to do that just in the interest of time. So back in 2017, then Senator Jason Rapert was able to get a monument of the 10 Commandments placed on the Arkansas State House grounds. This was immediately challenged as a violation of the Establishment Clause. And I've been fortunate enough to be involved as an expert witness for the state of Arkansas in defending that monument. That litigation has dragged on. It's still ongoing. It's going nowhere. We think about every 6 months, I call the Solicitor General's office and say, is this still a live case? And I'm told it is. I think the very liberal district court judge and the other side are dragging their feet because they know they do not have a case. They know they will lose. This summer, Louisiana passed a statute requiring displays of the 10 Commandments to be placed in public school classrooms. And here's why I wish I had the image. These granite monuments are massive things, thousands of pounds. These displays are very passive, relatively small in the context of other documents. And so this was passed this summer. Believe it or not, a federal district court judge just declared them to be unconstitutional just a couple of weeks ago. And so I've been up to my eyeballs writing an amicus brief supporting the state of Louisiana. One of the things the opponents of this law did is they brought in a so-called expert, actually kind of a nemesis of mine, a 10-year legal director of Americans United for Separation of Church and State. And he made a variety of observations, most of which are simply false, and yet the federal district court judge down in Louisiana just bought them wholesale. And so what I want to do is just briefly address some of these, and hopefully this will be useful ammunition for those of you considering such monuments. Hopefully it will make it clear that these are constitutional. I should say I'm not an attorney and cannot give legal advice, but I'm really quite sure that me and the attorneys I work with are right on the law here. And then if you would like, I would be happy to send a copy of my 114-page report for the Solicitor General's office or the amicus briefs, which will be published very briefly, if you would like. So one of the things, and this has been all over the media, and it is simply false. It was in the district court judge's opinion. That is that this is a Protestant version of the Ten Commandments that appeared on the Texas State House monument in Van Orden versus Perry, that appears on the Arkansas monument, and that would appear in the Louisiana displays. This is simply false. These monuments came into being in the mid-20th century when the Minnesota judge decided that there was a crisis of juvenile delinquency. And so he put together a committee of Catholics, Jews, and Protestants to come up with a version of the Ten Commandments that would not be identifiable with any particular tradition. They failed at first because they came out with a version numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And of course, different religious traditions number the commandments differently. So for instance, for some to keep the Sabbath holy is the third commandment, for others it's a fourth. So they went back to the drawing boards and they got rid of those numbers. And they put the text ambiguously so you cannot tell if it's a Protestant, Catholic, or Jewish version of the Ten Commandments. Now, Stephen Green in his testimony actually said, aha, I know it's a Catholic version of the Ten Commandments because the word thou is used. And the word thou is used in the King James Version. So therefore it's Protestant. That's nonsense. If you go to the 1899 Catholic Douay version of the Bible, thou is all over the place. If you go to the 1917 Jewish publication translation of the Bible, and of course we're all dealing with translations of the Bible here, they use thou as well. It is no one could say that based on any evidence that this is a Protestant version, a Catholic version, or a Jewish version. All right, so that's one point I wanted to make. The second one is you see people say all the time, this has been decided already. Stone versus Graham, 1980, the U.S. Supreme Court in a plurality opinion said that, in fact, a very similar law from Kentucky violates the Establishment Clause. That case does exist, but that case was decided when Lemon was in its prime, a case for interpreting the First Amendment, which was a flawed ahistorical analytical test that justices developed in 1971. It did not work at all. It led to all sorts of contradictory results. And so basically throughout most of the late 20th, early 21st century, justices simply ignored it. They finally killed it for good once and for all in Kennedy versus Bremerton. So Lemon is no longer good law, and Lemon is what underlie the Stone versus Graham. So what does the court do now? The court says for interpreting the Establishment Clause, we will look to the original understanding of what this clause was intended to do, and we will look to see if there's a long history and tradition of local governments, state governments, and national governments doing things like having legislative prayer, like having monuments with religious language and images on public spaces. This is what I documented for 114 pages in my Arkansas report. I'd be happy to share that with anyone. The last argument that comes up some, and this is really kind of the decisive argument, you're well aware, I'm sure, in 2005, you have two decisions decided on the same day. One upheld a huge granite monument of the Ten Commandments on the Texas State House grounds. The other declared unconstitutional a relatively passive display in Kentucky courthouses. Now, you do have 4 justices who would have held both monuments to be constitutional, 4 to hold them not to be constitutional. Stephen Breyer was the deciding vote, and basically he seemed to adopt a rule: old monuments are okay, new monuments are not, or new displays are not. So it's okay to uphold the Texas State House grounds monument because it's from 1961. It's okay to uphold the Brandenburg Cross because it's 1925. But Jason's monument from 2017 or Louisiana's displays from 2024, they're new. So they're not okay. One of the favorite pieces I ever wrote was published for Law and Liberty, and you can look it up. I make the simple point that if that is a rule, that profoundly discriminates against non-Christian traditions. So since 1993, and especially in the 21st century, we have seen a number of states and localities adopt monuments to commemorate the Holocaust. Inevitably, these monuments include Stars of David. The U.S. Holocaust Memorial, of course, does as well as plenty of scripture from the Hebrew, plenty of language from the Hebrew scriptures. If we have a rule that says old monuments are okay, but new ones aren't, that's going to require states and localities to scrub their public spaces of non-Christian images, such as the Star of David, while letting massive crosses remain in place. So I think it's simply a bad argument, and it's an argument the other side can't mean. So just to summarize, I think these monuments, these displays are clearly constitutional, and a lot of the objections you hear to them are just simply nonsense.
Thank you so much, and I apologize, I don't know about the presentation there, but you did an excellent job, and I found that was very fascinating about the discussion of the various versions of the Ten Commandments. I had never heard that. So, okay, at this point in time, we'll go to Andrea Justice with the First Liberty Institute.
Hi, thank you all so much for having me. And I will preface this with, I am not an attorney with First Liberty, but I do represent them, and I want to give you a little bit of information about who we are if you haven't heard of us. We are the largest nonprofit legal firm in the United States that defends religious liberty cases across the country. The Kennedy versus Bremerton case that my colleague referenced in his remarks was one that we took to the Supreme Court. So that was one of the 9 cases that we've won at the Supreme Court. We are 9-0. So we are definitely here to let you know that we are a resource for you all to help provide advice as you go through creating legislation that might be related to 10 Commandments or other religious liberty items. Like LifeWise Academies and things like that. So we're a resource to advise on that and provide legal support if you get challenged as you pass this legislation as well. My role at First Liberty is to support in executing on legislation within communities that has been passed. So I'm also a school board member in the state of Texas, so I bring a unique perspective to some of these conversations that we're currently having. I lead an initiative at First Liberty called Restoring Faith in America. And what I have been tasked with doing is going into communities and helping to educate on what the laws are in the state that they particularly live in, and help partner with organizations within the state to execute on putting up monuments and or other types of displays that are related to religious liberty. So for instance, I'm working in the state of Georgia right now with the 10 Commandments Georgia organization. There's some great legislation that you all have on the books around your Foundations of American Government displays that can be put up not only in public schools, but also other public locations like courthouses and city halls. So we've worked with Tom Rush and Linda Brown at the first 10 Commandments Georgia organization, and we're getting ready to launch an initiative to continue putting up those displays across the state of Georgia. There's still a lot of locations that don't have them up yet. We're partnering with the Patriot Academy, Rick Green, and their Constitution coaches, which is a great grassroots organization where we can have feet on the ground with people who already have been educated on what their rights are and are excited about going into these locations. So getting this legislation passed is the first step. And at First Liberty, we want to make sure that once the legislation is passed, that we can support states and local grassroots organizations in actually getting these things put out into communities and people exercising their religious liberties. So that's who I am, and that's what I represent for First Liberty. And if you guys have any questions about First Liberty or how we can support you once this legislation is passed, I'd be happy to speak with you about that.
All right, thank you, Ms. Justice. I think at this time we'll go ahead with the legislation proposed, the display of the 10 Commandments, and Representative Gidley, would you mind discussing your proposed legislation?
Thank you, sir. Representative Mark Gidley from the great state of Alabama. I want to talk just a moment, and I'll try to move as swiftly as I can for time's sake, a little bit about the legislation and also about some legal precedent and constitutionality of the legislation. Let me just run through these real quickly. The Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court, repeatedly affirmed historical and educational value. This is in Van Orden versus Perry, 2005, American Legion and versus American Humanist in 2019. Private donations and constitutional compliance. The bills aligns with the Pleasant Grove City versus Summon in 2009 by permitting displays funded by private donations, ensuring no taxpayer burden. And then, of course, no religious endorsement. The bill is carefully designed to avoid favoritism toward any religion or denomination, framing the display within a historical and educational content. And I think that's very important that we recognize that first of all, there is no requirement in this legislation for any kind of that would cause any kind of financial burden on the school board. It will be provided by private donations, and also that this is allowed to be framed with other documents such as the Mayflower Compact, the Bill of Rights, whatever they might frame that with, because this bill really points out not only just the spiritual, religious, but the historical part of the Ten Commandments. Let me also just throw this in here too. I think as we go forward, we're going to face a lot of people that say you're trying to force religion into school. We're not trying to put something new by this legislation. We're trying to return something that's been taken away. And I think that's a very good point that needs to be made. This was, these things, and if you look through the legislation, I'm trying to move through swiftly here without reading everything word for word. But if you look through the legislation, it points out in numerous places many references to the display of both the Ten Commandments and other historical documents that were a part of our heritage and a part of our culture for over almost 200 years. It's only been in the last few years that those things, over the last few decades, that they were removed. This is simply putting back the historical documents and the foundational principles that guided our nation for so many years. Let me go on here and read a couple of other things. Historical and educational significance. The Ten Commandments have deeply influenced American law, governance. The moral framework is acknowledged by figures like Madison and like the Mayflower Compact. The displays of the Ten Commandments reflect their long-standing role in American public education. They sing in the New England Primer. They include a contextual explanation of the Ten Commandments' role in American education. The cultural and civical benefits. It displays and reinforces the foundational principles of morality, respect for law, and self-governance were essential to maintaining a functional democratic society. If you're familiar with John Adams' statement, he said, "We have a government that is only supported by a moral and religious value that will, no other thing will sustain this except that." This simply returns that foundational principle that our founders definitely understood. By pairing the Ten Commandments with other key documents like the Mayflower Compact, the Declaration of Independence, the legislation fosters a deeper understanding of Americans' culture. Of course, the no unfunded mandates that I've already mentioned. Schools and governing authorities retain autonomy over the nature and placement of the displays. We move on here. The bill celebrates the moral and cultural heritage that aligns with NACL's mission to honor Americans' Christian foundation with respect to religious diversity. And by empowering states to make decisions on historical displays, the legislation reinforces the state autonomy. And then finally here, promoting civil literacy. The legislation is a proactive measure to educate students about the historical roots of modern law, governance, and morality. Polling consistently indicates strong public support for including the Ten Commandments, and as the NACL model bill, it sets a strong precedent for other states to reaffirm their commitment to education, heritage, and the values that underpin American democracy. One of the things I think we need to remember is that in one of the rulings by the Supreme Court, now I do not remember the Supreme Court justice that made this statement, but one of the statements made by a Supreme Court justice when removing the Ten Commandments said, "We must remove them because children may read these and be influenced to obey them." Now, I don't know about you, but that's just flat out stupid. So I think and you have a copy, I believe, of the model legislation. I think you have that. All that I've highlighted here is hit very distinctly in this model legislation. It goes in detail about our historical heritage, about no financial burden upon the school district, and also placing these with other historical documents, which puts it in a context of being a part of our historical foundational heritage of America. And with that, I yield. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative Gidley. And I also want to recognize the efforts of Representative Horton, who is not here today, from Louisiana, who worked on this bill to get it passed. And thank you for that. Again, if there's no burning questions at this moment, we'll go ahead and take action on this particular model piece of legislation. And I will say, I'm sure y'all will be around afterwards to answer specific questions. All right, we did have one burning question. No burning question?
Discussion.
Oh, you
Move
have
the
a
bill.
discussion. Okay, one discussion.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would just like to move this bill forward as model legislation for NACL. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion, and do we have a second for that? Name and state, please.
Representative Chris Todd from Tennessee, a second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Then all in favor of adopting this model legislation, say aye. Any opposed? Okay, it passes. Thank you again. And in terms of your presentation that we didn't get, perhaps there's a way that we can get the PowerPoint emailed to us later somehow, perhaps. Okay, thank you. Now we're going to move next immediately to the third piece of legislation, which is the 10 Commandments Monument Display Act, and that is, yes, Representative Metzger from Maryland, please.
Good afternoon, or good morning. If there's ever been a no-brainer, I think there's a no-brainer right here. I'm blessed and fortunate to serve in a house in Annapolis, Maryland. And in 447 years, I walked the same halls that George Washington, James Madison, Thomas Jefferson. And I walk those halls and I walk those floors and the corridors. I look around and I see monuments, but I see no 10 Commandments. And as I was thinking about this the other day, when I was asked to share my thoughts was that why we don't have one of these. And then the question is, since it's a no-brainer, let's get it done. But my thought was that there's a historical significance. And the historical significance is the foundations of the American law. Some of the PowerPoint presentation almost explains what I'm sharing. But it talks about that played a critical role in shaping the moral and the legal principles that underpin the U.S. legal system and the governance. The inclusion in the court decisions and public acknowledgement underscores the historical precedents. The legal precedent, the United States Supreme Court has upheld constitutionally of the 10 Commandments. Displays on private property recognize the dual role of the artifacts, moral foundations, the case like Van Orden versus Perry in 2005, the American Legion versus the American Humanist Society in 2019. Let me just bring this to you, that state capitals across the country that already have these is Texas, Arkansas, Arizona, Colorado, Missouri, and there's many other public places as well. But the cultural heritage that involves this display of the 10 Commandments honors the shared culture and ethical heritage that has guided the civic morality and development in self-governance in America. The education and the civic value, as we talked about earlier this morning, my thought was when the first panel come up, my thought was, wonder when these teaching the Bible, if it brings the crime and the bullying down, thought comes in. When you think about the 10 Commandments outside of a public school or in a school system, you think about how that reflects upon the legacy of families. Educational and civic value, civic education. This bill would provide the opportunity for citizens, especially the younger generations, to learn about the roots of the modern law and the governance, fostering and understand the civic responsibility of moral values, promoting awareness and placing the 10 Commandments monument on the state capitol grounds enhances the public awareness of the historical sources that influence the American legal tradition. Legal and practical strength. There's no state expense. The monuments were funded and constructed by private entities, ensuring that no tax dollars will be spent, allowing the private-public collaboration. Constitutional safeguards. This bill includes the clear language to ensure a compliance with the constitutional principles, explicitly in stating the monument does not endorse a particular religion nor denomination. The legal defense framework. The provisions are included for the robust and legal through the Attorney General and nonprofit organizations that we've heard from this morning, specializing in First Amendment cases. Ladies and gentlemen, I truly believe that the Lord is in the last few months has opened a door and a window for America to come back to its roots and get on its knees and begin, because the word says, if my people shall humble themselves and pray, then I will heal their land. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe the window that we have is small and short, but I believe we need to get these things done. Again, upholding the Judeo-Christian values, the NACL advocates for preserving the moral foundations of society. And this bill reflects the central role of the Ten Commandments in shaping the values. My son and I was talking about this the other day, and he said they really need to emphasize, thou shalt not covet thy neighbors, whatever he has. Promoting state sovereignty by affirming the state authority to honor historical and cultural contributions. This bill, ladies and gentlemen, inserts the roles of the states maintaining the moral and civic values of the American system. And then finally, wrapping up here, the broad public support. I truly believe that polls, particularly the Gonzalez poll, shows widespread public support for recognizing the Ten Commandments in civic spaces as part of America's historical and cultural legacy. Nationwide impact adopting this model bill sets the precedent for other states to celebrate their legal and moral foundations, reinforcing national unity while respecting individual and state traditions. This bill is a thoughtful, balanced approach to preserving the moral and historical significance of the Ten Commandments, fostering education and upholding constitutional principles. Ladies and gentlemen, a no-brainer I present to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Representative Metzger, for your explanation and your passion for this. And again, in the sake of time, at this time, I would recognize anyone who would like to make a motion to approve this model legislation. Is anybody present? Representative Bentley?
Thank you, Chairman. I make a motion to pass that we pass this as model legislation for NACL.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second somewhere?
Mr. Chair, second.
Second.
Senator Carley from South
Senator
Dakota.
Carley, okay. And there's no real discussion, is there? Okay. All in favor, say aye. And any opposed, like sign. Thank you so much. We have one more bill on the agenda, and that is Representative Bentley has the library bill, I believe. If you'd like to come and briefly describe, everybody should have a copy of that in front of you.
Thank you, Chairman. If you guys will look, we discussed this bill when we were in Liberty this summer, and I just want to give you guys an update. We actually presented this as working papers. So been working with our Bureau of Legislative Research in Arkansas to get it in more of a bill form. So I'm presenting this to you guys for you to look at and to review. I just want you continuing to make sure that we are not in any form or fashion doing any sexual grooming of our children at school. I think this is the time, this is the hour for us to push forward as much as we possibly can to protect our children. I think the wind is in our sails. I think we're seeing more and more the American people have woken up and spoke loud in this last election to make sure we're not grooming our children. So this is, I want you guys to continue to see this is a lengthy piece of legislation, 16 pages, but wanted to bring it forth and continue just an update on what we're doing with this library bill. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you so much. I don't think we're taking action on this today. This is for your information and for your continued consideration that we will probably take up at another meeting later on. All right. I almost got us out in time, but thank you so much, all the presenters and all of those who brought forward information. It was excellent, and thank you all for your service. And we'll stand this committee meeting adjourned.
Members, if you want to take any of these documents with you, feel free to take them. If you don't, you want to leave them there. If you're not going to take it back and run it or whatever, leave it there. We'll pick it up and we'll use it for the executive committee. But we need to turn this around pretty quickly to the next. So feel free to have a seat or go use the restroom. But we're going to try to get started in the next couple minutes with the next meeting.
Almost got us out.
You did. That was If the members don't mind moving in and please come sit up kind of on the U-shaped piece, we would appreciate it. But if the members would come in and take their seats, we're going to get started.
Folks out in the hall, we need you to come in here. Legislators, please come on in and have a seat around the table. Get started with the Committee on Marriage and Family. We're a little behind schedule here. There is a rumor of lunch at 11:30, so we want to continue working on that, especially since it'll probably take you 10 to 15 minutes to walk back down the hall to get to lunch. Okay, I'm going to call this meeting of the Marriage and Family Committee together. I'm going to start with a short prayer. So if you bow our heads. Dear Lord, our Father, our King, this is a time then that this committee is a servant to you. We understand from your word in Genesis that this is what you wanted. You wanted natural families, one man, one woman. This is an important part of this committee and what our model legislation puts forward. We also understand that you have lots of humor in your life that you pass on to us, and so therefore you've created us legislators with the task of serving our people. But a big part of that serving our people and part of that marriage and family is our spouses. And so we thank you and we want to note that all you legislators that have spouses today, that there is a spouses meeting at 1:15 later on today, and you really need to attend, spouses really need to attend that. So in your son's name, thank you. We appreciate your values that you bring forward to this committee. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so we're going to get started today. We've got a couple things that we're going to have for discussion and then a possibility of moving some model legislation. We're going to try to keep it pretty tight. The first discussion, and if you're looking at your agenda, is how states can protect kids online. And we have two folks that are going to be part of that discussion this morning. John Schweppe, I think I got that right, Director of Policy and Government Affairs from the American Principles Project, and then our favorite representative, Sarah Vance from Alaska, and she's going to discuss some of the legislation and potential model bills. So I'm going to turn it over to John. Thank you.
Well, thank you guys so much. So I am so excited to be here because we've been having tremendous success in the fight to protect kids online, in large part due to a lot of the folks in this room. So we have 19 states now that have passed age verification for porn websites. That case is now at the Supreme Court, and we're anticipating a really good result there, which we'll get in June. So we have really done a great job, but I think we can build on that, and that's what we're talking about here today. So for those of you who are in states that have passed those porn age verification bills, you know the bills aren't perfect. There's still ways for children to access harmful content. There's still all sorts of issues, and so we have to continue to build. And so our coalition of pro-family, protect kids online folks, in DC, we met and we got together and we wanted to go with a 2.0 version. And that's what we believe we have here with the App Store Accountability Act. Now, this actually goes a little bit further. We talked about porn specifically and material harmful to minors. This bill actually is much more about a parental consent component. So the App Store Accountability Act relies on a standard legal principle that multi-trillion-dollar companies cannot contract with children. Terms of service are contracts, plain and simple. So Tim Cook at Apple should not be negotiating on behalf of children to undermine their parents. To ensure that parents are in charge, the Act would leverage a standard policy prescription to prevent children from accessing addictive services or products. The onus would be on the App Store to age-gate the product. We don't rely on Marlboro or Budweiser to ensure kids aren't purchasing their products. We look to CVS, we look to 7-Eleven, and supermarkets to do the age gating. And so this proposal argues that the app ecosystem should be no different. And one of the things, as you guys know, in the States with the porn bills, a lot of privacy advocates, other folks were arguing, well, how are you going to do the age verification? And, there's lots of different ways we can do it. There's the IDs, there's biometrics, there's consumer data that's associated with the devices. But the nice thing about app stores is that they already have this information. So we're basically asking them to use the data they're already collecting for good, right? So app stores provide more age certainty in the mobile context because they have more access to the age information, given that they not only control the app store, but the operating systems on the devices themselves. Google and Apple already make up close to 99% of the app store market. Kids are accessing harmful services through their mobile devices, and it's facilitated by those app stores. The Federal Trade Commission actually has already placed Apple and Google under consent decrees that already require both companies to obtain parental consent for each app purchase or purchases within the app. So this means Apple and Google most likely already have these age verification mechanisms in place to comply with those decrees. So I can go on further. We really like the bill. I will say the bill is a work in progress. I mean, the states are the laboratories of democracy, right? The best way to improve this bill and make it better is to go through the process in the states to get criticisms from our opponents, even the companies themselves, and to try to make this as strong as possible to protect kids and to protect the rights of parents.
Thank you very much. And Representative Vance, would you like to add to that?
Thank you. Good morning. I'm going to talk about the specifics of the current legislation, but I wanted to kind of bring this home for a minute. I have been on this quest to defend the vulnerable, and many of you have partnered with me in working on human trafficking. But what we have found out is that there are so many other areas that are influencing our children. And last year, or a couple years ago in Virginia, I brought Lieutenant Ryan Browning of the Homer Police Department to talk about the CDC report that came out in 2021. And this is of our high schoolers and our youth. And this report said that among girls, 30% said that they seriously considered attempting suicide. That means that they had a plan. They had a plan to end their life. Doubled that rate among boys and almost up 60% from the decade prior. Almost 20% of the girls reported experiencing rape or other sexual violence in the previous year, also an increase of the previous years. Feelings of persistent sadness and hopelessness affected more than 1/3 of kids of all races and ethnicities and increased over previous years. And what they looked at is that after isolation from the pandemic, online schooling and increased reliance on social media during the pandemic made things worse for many kids, the mental health experts say. Because of that time, a lot of our kids are online and social media so much more than they were in the prior years. And it created an addictive nature that impacts their brain. Many of you already know about the dopamine effect and things like that. In my house, my 10 and 12-year-old boys are all about the technology and about the games, and it started out with the farm game that they do with my husband. But there are games that they can download through the App Store very, very easily. And as we know, there are predators who utilize those apps. And so I talk about this to really highlight why this is so important. When we look at the statistic that 30% of young women have a plan to commit suicide, I thought about my 15-year-old daughter and her core group of friends. There's about 4 of them. There's 3 to 4. They're really tight. And statistically, this study tells me that at least one of those girls has a plan to end her life. And so much of that came through the presence of social media and the bullying and the imagery that says that they are not who God created them to be, that they're unacceptable in the way that they are and how they look or how they act or anything like that. And so I want to highlight how urgent this issue is to the success of our children and their identity, God-given identity, and to their future mental health. So when we look at this technology, and this bill is very technical, and many of you who may not consider yourselves techies may not want to take interest in this. But I encourage you to set that mindset aside that it really is much simpler than what it appears. And it's well worth it. I love where this model bill is going because it attacks the issue at a very simplistic level. I moved the bill that would restrict porn to minors in Alaska, and we had a lot of opposition from the left. But this one doesn't discriminate on any issue. It says, regardless of what the app is, there should be parental consent, because minors cannot make a contract and they cannot engage in activity that we have come to, we don't realize that so much of what we do on these devices is a contract. Every time you hit the I agree, it is a contract, and minors cannot give that consent. So this emphasizes the parental controls and working with these app store companies. And I love that because when we have talked about this, we've said social media is the problem. But if Meta and Google and these companies are the problem, then they are part of the solution. So I just want to thank Meta for being here and having this conversation and working with us on this bill, because I fully believe that they can bring the solution that can get the right discipline when it comes to use of these apps and the digital technology. So what this bill does is it empowers the parental oversight, and it provides parents with the tools to manage and oversee their children's app usage, purchases, and in-app activities, ensuring children are shielded from inappropriate content. Provides that safeguard, and it has enhanced age verification. And it cannot bypass the protections meant to safeguard their well-being, because it uses a government-issued ID, which we already have when we do the downloads and things like that, that is already available, just as John mentioned. It balances the parental rights and the industry of freedom, so that you are fully making this informed consent and making sure that you as an adult are making the purchases. I don't know if you've seen some of the headlines where a child bought a lot of Amazon purchases, and there were hundreds of dollars of packages arrived on the doorstep, and the young child was very pleased, but the parent, however, said, "What in the world just happened?" So there's a lot of that going on because we are not requiring those app stores to make sure that there is age verification for these things. So it can be something as practical as your child not buying all of those fun toys on Amazon, or the other extreme of accessing the harmful visual content that is going to impact their mind. So this has when you look in the bill, it's about 6 pages long. There's a lot of great definitions to help you in your state. App Store requirements, it provides, it shall obtain verifiable parental consent before allowing a minor located in the state to download, purchase, or use the apps, as I mentioned. This is section 4. But I want to skip over to the enforcement, because that's often the question that we have with this in states is we have all these great ideas, but will it be enforced? And in section 9 on page 6, it says the enforcement shall be by the Attorney General. And then in section 10, enforcement by parents. Parents whose child has been victimized by a violation of this act by a covered app store provider and developer may bring a civil cause of action against an entity for a violation. So there's a lot of different switches in place to help make sure that this is not only going to be implemented, but it's going to be enforced. It's going to empower the state to take action and defend your privacy rights, your parental rights, safeguarding our children. But the parents also have a defense for civil cause of action if that protection is not put in place. So as was mentioned, this is a work in progress. This is something I want to thank Senator Bob Ballinger for working on with John Schweppe and trying to get this before us, because we need help in making this the best possible piece of legislation available. So we wanted to talk about it today so that we can work on it and then possibly bring it back as a full model in our June meeting in Virginia. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And again, that was your attachment one that was on the bill that you were looking at. And want to reinforce, take this bill back home with you, visit with your other colleagues, get ideas, whatever, email back Representative Vance, and let's look at making this a positive impact on what's going on with the different apps and the app stores. So appreciate your presentations. Thank you very much. I just have a real quick question. Are any of the folks from Simon's Law here? Did they happen? Their flight was coming in late. Just check and see if they might be here. Okay, thank you. All right, so I'm going to spend some time and turn this over to Representative John McCravey. He's from South Carolina. He's going to visit with us a little bit about the women's privacy protection, and then he has a speaker that he's going to pass it on to. So I'm going to pass it on to Representative McCravey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a very important bill that is circulating, and certainly we have somebody here today that's going to discuss it with us, Tanya Shelnut. But before I turn it over to her, I want everybody here to understand who we have that's going to present this here today. Tanya is the ADF, Alliance Defending Freedom Director over all the state's legislation. We have worked with her in South Carolina because we're fortunate to have her living in our state. And so we prevailed on her from day one. And our family caucus, we've got a lot of members now. We've got over 50 legislators in our family caucus that work with her. Alliance Defending Freedom is a great resource. Not only will they give you the legislation you need, but they litigate. So their attorneys, as an attorney, I'm real particular about my legislation. I want it to be real tight legally, so you can trust ADF always. And I wanted to mention too that she was responsible for getting the Save Women's Sports Act passed. I mean, we obviously are the legislators, but she was behind that in South Carolina. She helped us get that done. She can help you do it in your state. And last year, she helped us get the Help Not Harm bill done, which was protecting our minors from this transgender stuff. So in addition to that, I don't know where she gets the time. She's got a big family, but she also does a podcast to help women with trauma. She's just an amazing person. So she's going to be currently helping us in South Carolina with our parental rights bills in medical and education too. She's been a fighter for our values, and I want to ask her to talk about this bill, but I would like to just recognize her, and if we could give her a hand for all she's done for us.
I don't know how I'm supposed to recuperate from that. I promise I didn't pay him to say any of that stuff. I'm so thankful to be here. Representative McCravey and everyone that's in the room, I think appreciate the opportunity. So as John said, and I go on first name basis with him, but I am the Senior State Government Relations Director for ADF. And those of you that are not familiar with Alliance Defending Freedom, we cover 5 areas: parental rights, marriage and family life, religious liberty, and free speech. And we do serve lawmakers by doing bill review. We have a library of language pertaining to our 5 pillars. We do media training, committee prep, testifying, coalition building. And we've been at the Supreme Court 16 times in the last 10 years as lead counsel. And those of you that are familiar with the Supreme Court know that they only take up less than 1% of the cases. And so we're very blessed to be on a team that loves to win. So I want to talk with you about why I'm here today. Near and dear to my heart is the issue of women's privacy. And so what's the problem with it? The problem is that men claiming female identities are invading private, vulnerable spaces that are reserved for women. Recently, California did a report, and of the 382 transfer requests that were made by biological men wanting to be moved to the women's facility, as they were claiming that they were women, 33.8 of them were sex offenders. The Federal Bureau of Prison reports that 47.8% of the male inmates claiming a female identity are serving time for sex offenders. There are no safeguards against male sex offenders who've committed these crimes against women from transferring to all female facilities. And I want to read you this quote that came from this report. It says, "They're coming into our spaces and moving us out of them. The little rehabilitation that is going on here is being destroyed and evaporated. If you are in survival mode every day, you can't rehabilitate." We then move into the Title IX context, and female spaces are meant for female spaces. Locker rooms need to be protected. The Biden administration's new rule changes the definitions, and I'm sure the new administration is going to fix it. But we can see how quickly the dangerous liberal agenda hurts women and girls. And so states must enact permanent guardrails. So what does the bill do? The most comprehensive women's privacy laws currently are in Louisiana and Florida. This bill includes correctional facilities, violent family shelters, juvenile detention centers, public schools, institutions of higher education. Includes restrooms, changing rooms, shower rooms, and sleeping arrangements. I want to share a very quick story with you. In Montana, we had a situation where a student was going on a field trip with a group of students, and when they got to the hotel, the student was informed that they would be being housed, because if you know anything about field trips with students, they normally put 2 to a bed when you have double queens. And the student was informed that they were going to be housed, sleeping in the same bed with a student that was a male student identifying as a female. That student ended up calling her mother and slept in the bathtub for the night. And so to say that this isn't happening is foolish. That was in Montana. I know we had a situation recently in, I want to say, Wisconsin. So this is an issue. So let's talk really quickly about the verbiage we use. You'll find at your seat a bunch of handouts with some of the messaging on how we talk about this issue. We don't want to say the word transgender. We want to say a man attempting to take on a female identity. It's always, always, always not about being transgender. It's about safety and privacy. Because we do believe that students that are experiencing confusion, they do need compassionate support. But because they're experiencing that doesn't mean we let men into women's spaces. And forcing policies that allow men into private spaces causes embarrassment, distress, and particularly for victims of sexual assault. And it goes back to that quote that I read. How do they rehabilitate when they're always on edge? And then I'll share one story, and I'll turn it over to Representative McCravy to talk further about the bill. We have a situation in Alaska, the Downtown Hope Center. It's a women's, it's a shelter where women are housed in bunk style in the rooms. And one evening, an intoxicated man purporting to be a female came to the facility and wanted to stay there. And obviously, you have these women in there who are victims of sexual abuse, physical abuse. The director didn't want to subject them to any kind of uncomfortable trauma or anything of that nature. So they made appropriate arrangements to get him to a facility down the road, and that person ended up suing the shelter for discrimination. We went on to win that case, but this was in Alaska, in Montana. So don't think that this isn't coming to you. And I just want to reiterate that this issue is a winning issue. We have 80% of polling on our side on this, and it's not wrong. We're not on the wrong side of history to protect and support women. And all you have to do is look back 4 years to see how quickly that was eroded. So this is just common sense legislation that does just that. I'll conclude there.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to turn back to Representative McCravey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We all have the bill in front of us. Just generally it protects women from man incursions in correctional facilities, family violence shelters, juvenile detention centers, public schools, and institutions of higher education. So at this time, I would move that we adopt this bill.
Thank you very much. Do we have a second on that? Thank you, Denise. Can you get that? Okay. Yep. All right. So all in favor of passing this as model legislation from NACL, confirm with aye. Aye. And similar sign if against. Thank you. So we will pass this on as model legislation. You'll be seeing more of this later on tomorrow in our conference. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question for Ms. Shellett. Thank you. Could you repeat again how you described transgender? Because I think in this conversation, we're real good at going at the legalese or the legislation, but we lose the argument because we lose the language. And I thought your comments on how to describe this is probably even more important than the legislation itself.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for the question. And also for your information, you can email me. We have messaging, an actual messaging document with these terms on it. And I'd be more than happy to get that to you, Bob, to distribute to the members. But what I said was we want to make sure that we say this. We do not say transgender. Sorry, I'm pulling up my notes so I get it right. See, here we go. We want to say a man attempting to take on female identity. So a man attempting to take on female identity.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think that's a good point. We need to push back with our own language. We've had the media, we've had, the other side has been for years pushing language down our throats of terminology that, 1 or 2 generations, we have certain words that we have learned in education that we just give for granted. And those words need to be changed. We need to be changing the language. So I want to slip this on to talking about a bill that came to my attention, and that has to do with Simon's Law. Let me give you a little bit of background. I was hoping the folks were flying in from Dallas. They were a little late getting here. So I'm hoping that those folks that started the Simon's Law, it actually got started in Kansas, or was passed in Kansas, I think like in 2016, 2017, and since then it's in several other states. And typically, when the folks come in and talk about this, they will, show some of the states that it's been passed. It is one of those things that we would just like to bring to your attention, talking about parent rights. So when a parent finds out that they are going to have a new child and a doctor tells you that there is something wrong with this child, or the possibility of something wrong with this child, and the doctor tells you that that the best thing to do is to get rid of this child. And Simon's Law is one of those things that counteracts and says, no, the parents have the right to make this kind of a decision, not the doctor. And I just got a few little highlights here that it's not in your bill, but some points that I would like to make since those folks are not here. So first of all, it talks about affirming parent authority and respecting that the family's role is the primary decision maker. And it's guarding against the outreach that I think the whole healthcare industry is trying to push down our throats about what is life and what is not life. Parent in empowerment, this is a very tender age when someone finds out that they're going to have a child. And so when that doctor right off the bat gives them some kind of a announcement that there's a problem with your pregnancy, we need to let the parents have that empowerment, that education to know that they can make that choice. It's not the doctor that needs to make that choice. Also, a little bit about transparency and accountability in the healthcare realm. So mandatory disclosure, disclose any policies that they might have on life-sustaining measures, and detailed documentation on decisions and anything that might happen, potential disputes between the family and the doctors or the hospital, protections against hindered transfers, in other words, cooperating with their efforts to seek a second opinion. It's a very emotional time, and so I'm sure any of you, and you probably visit with your constituents, whether you go into your family physician and they say, well, there's a possibility that you might have cancer, you might have this, you might have that. Well, this is another one of those sensitive times, and most people have so much trust in their doctor that they don't know or think about having a second opinion. And so having a second opinion about a very sensitive thing like this is very important. And then the presumption of life and the value of life. So we've had friends that we've known for years and years that are parents of special children, and they will tell you, and I'm sure if you get a chance to visit with the folks from Simon's Law, they will tell you that other children in that family, the relatives from that family, learn a lot from that child's life. And whether that child lives for a few hours, a few days, a few years, that life was important, and that affected other people's lives too, for a positive thing. Just keep on going here to keep us on schedule. So I would like you to look through this bill. I think those folks are going to be here maybe later on today, and if you have a chance to visit with them, you'll have some good discussion. So I'm just going to leave that for there. We're not going to have any move that bill or make any change, anything at this point. But I would like you to seriously have you take a few minutes and look through that law and see what you think, and if you have any suggestion. So well, we have a couple minutes here. Would anybody like to have any other discussions from just your brief reading about Simon's Law? Yes, sir.
Thank you. I actually had one of my constituents approach me on something that is in this ballpark, dealing with children at the age of 15 consenting for organ donation. They had a beautiful daughter, 24. Now, this lady's a nurse. She knows what she's doing. Her daughter had choked, had lost oxygen, really was in a state of trauma. And they basically showed up and said, you have no rights to stop this. because she signed this when she was 15. And you can't enter a contract, a minor can't, but there's they get $2 million for a heart. This is a money thing. And when they go and, this isn't, well, she's mostly dead. They literally would prefer that the body is still functioning because that's the healthiest of the organs. This is not to stop organ donation, because it does save and help lives, but it's to make sure that this loophole where health is being determined, the value of life being determined when they're not truly dead. And so I'm going to look for some help on how to approach this, but this just came to me just before I came here. And it's heartbreaking. And they had to fight for that. Their daughter eventually did pass, but they were in the fight of their life. And so we really want to pursue this because they're trying to steal the very definition of life itself.
Yeah. That was very good. Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay. Yeah. Representative from Kansas.
Hi, Sandy Pickert from Kansas. So part of the story behind Simon's Law is the family that had Simon, the doctors they wrote an order for do not resuscitate. The parents were not aware of that, and they did not agree with it. But when Simon got into trouble, no aggressive measures were taken to save him. He was essentially let to die because of the DNR from the physicians. So that was the impetus for this bill.
Thank you. And again, I thank you, Representative Pickard. That was before my time, so it was good having a little history about that bill. Came to my attention at the pro-family legislators conference that we had in November. These folks were there, and I spent some time talking to them. So unless we have some more discussion or any other matters that would want to be brought before the committee? Okay, I am going to call this meeting adjourned.
Members, we have 5 minutes. We'll start on time with the American-Israel Relations Committee at 11:30. So we'll see you guys at 11:30.
Hey, folks, if you could make it to your seats, we're going to be getting started. Good afternoon, everyone. I am acutely aware that I am between you and lunch, so we're going to get going. I first want to say thank you so much for the opportunity, Senator Rapert. I am so incredibly honored for the opportunity to chair this committee. The committee is new to me. My predecessor did not run for re-election, and so I've been asked to take over, and I'm very excited to be chairing the Committee on America and Israel for NACL. We have three things on our agenda. The first thing was a resolution of support for the nomination of former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee. However, Representative McGrew is just coming in, so we're going to give him a minute to catch his breath, and we'll put that on the bottom of the agenda.
He's there, but go ahead.
Oh, Representative McGrew, did you want to go ahead?
No, okay.
Okay, we'll give it a break.
Okay.
The next item is resolution condemning the World Criminal Court for their indictment and call for the arrest of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel. Representative Scott Bottoms of Colorado has brought this forward. Thank you very much. It's attachment 2 in your packets. Representative, would you like to tell us about this, and if you'd like to give us specific language, feel free.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. It's also, just as a side note, it's been very encouraging to me to vote yes on all these things. I don't get to vote yes very often in Colorado. So this is like Christmas early. This is beautiful. This is extremely important to me. I'm also a pastor for 35 years, and standing with Israel is, I think, of the utmost importance. This international criminal court is a sham to begin with. It shouldn't exist. They also let, as you can see in here, they also let the Palestinian territories become members in 2015. This is a continuation of the sham. There is actually no such thing as the Palestinian people. There's no Palestinian bloodline. That was the Israelis back in the 1920s were called the Palestinians in that arena. And so this is just another way to try to attack Israel from every single angle. The United Nations makes a living out of attacking Israel. And so this entire thing has been egregious. And the fact that they're going after Netanyahu for defending his country is barbaric. And so I do like this. I think it's important. I would like to actually see the ICC done away with, not just condemned, but I don't think that we have that power. So to look down through, you can read through this, but I do think it's very interesting that they're trying to prosecute Netanyahu for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. That is exactly the opposite that is happening. The United States and Israel both condemn the ICC on a national level, and should be something that we continue to do also. And so I like this. I think it's great that we can do this as a group and send this up the chain. So I submit this and move for its adoption.
Thank you, Representative. Is there a second?
Representative Chris Todd from Tennessee, I second.
Thank you. All of those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The resolution is adopted. Thank you, Representative. Next, we have a resolution of support for Israel bonds, urging cities, counties, states to invest in Israel bonds, condemning anti-Semitism, thank you for this, and in support of Israel. State Treasurer Robert Sprague of Ohio.
Thank you, Senator Tice. I just want to mention a little bit about the Israel bonds and how important it is to support Israel. We can pass all kind of legislation that we want to in this body, but when you invest in an Israel bond and you spend United States dollars to buy that bond, the next day when that wire transfer goes through, that money ends up in Israel and it goes to pay for infrastructure, it goes to pay for resilience, it goes to pay for green technology, it goes to pay for biotech technology, it goes to pay for roads and bridges, rebuilding after the war. It's a real and present help. And so our resolution today is to support not just the investment in Israel bonds, but for the United States not to step back from its investment in Israel and to stand with Israel at a crucial time in her history. Israel bonds, purchasing Israel bonds is not a partisan issue. Democrats and Republicans have been purchasing Israel bonds in state treasuries, in local treasuries, in federal treasuries since 1951. It has a long history. They have never missed a payment in the history of the Israel bonds' existence. In the state of Ohio, we have purchased Israel bonds for almost 40 years out of the state treasury. And I'll tell you why we do it. It's not just to support our ally in the Middle East, the democracy in the state of Israel, but it's also because these Israel bonds provide a great return. It has a liquidity premium that really enhances our portfolio, and they're a good risk. They make all the sense in the world to add to our portfolio. On October the 7th, when Israel was attacked, there was a clarion call to be able to fund the government of the state of Israel at a critical time. And I just want to mention by name some of the state treasurers that came through for the first tranche of funding for Israel bonds. Pennsylvania Treasurer Stacey Garrity, Texas Comptroller Glenn Hagar, Florida Comptroller Jimmy Petronas, Palm Beach County Treasurer Joe Abruzzo, and also the state of Ohio. We stepped forward 3 days after those October 7th attacks to stand with the state of Israel and buy a substantial tranche of those Israel bonds, because we knew at that point that the state of Israel needed liquidity, needed support, and also needed someone strong to stand with her. And so I guess today with this resolution, we're asking all of our state legislatures to stand with the state of Israel. The reality is there is rising anti-Semitism, not just in the United States, but internationally. There are emerging threats from all sides for the state of Israel, and we've seen that, although it looks like Syria is going to be much less of a threat here in the coming days. And we want to make sure that we're not only showing support for Israel, but that we're not backing down from the existing support for Israel. They are our ally of the United States in the Middle East. They are a democracy, and they are fighting for their very existence as we speak. And so with that, Senator Tice, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to explain the remainder of the resolution. But I think that I've covered most of the major points of the resolution as we urge federal, state, and local governments to stand with Israel and invest in Israel bonds. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Are there any questions? I thank you for bringing this forward. I've found it shocking, frankly, since October 7th, the level of anti-Semitism that I had no idea existed. I knew there was a little bit, but the extent has been something that has been truly shocking to me. And Israel is not only unique in its place in history, but unique in what it's done for its economy. You want to see how a state grows, take a look at what they've done. So I wholeheartedly support what you're doing. Is there a motion to support this resolution? We have a motion. Do we have a second? Thank you, Delegate. Any further commentary? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Resolution passes. Thank you, Treasurer. And last on our item list here is a resolution of support for the nomination of former Arkansas Governor and friend in NACL, Governor Mike Huckabee, as Ambassador to Israel. Representative McGrew.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to present this resolution. I think President Donald Trump made a great choice here. Being a representative of Arkansas and knowing Governor Huckabee personally, it's quite an honor. To present the resolution supporting the nomination of Governor Mike Huckabee as United States Ambassador to Israel. Whereas President-elect Donald Trump has nominated Governor Mike Huckabee as the United States Ambassador to Israel, recognizing his intense experience, passion, and commitment to the U.S.-Israel alliance. Whereas Governor Huckabee is a 3-term governor of Arkansas, a Baptist minister, a well-known advocate for Israel, bringing a unique combination of political expertise, faith-driven values, and personal ties to the region. Whereas Governor Huckabee has been a vocal supporter of Israel's right to sovereignty and self-defense and rooted in his personal beliefs and unwavering support for democracy in this region. Whereas Governor Huckabee's nomination highlights the universal importance of the U.S.-Israeli relationship, being the first non-Jewish U.S. ambassador to Israel in over a decade. Whereas Governor Huckabee has demonstrated strong ties to Israel through frequent visits, leadership of evangelical tours, emphasizing the spiritual and historic significance of the Holy Land and his belief in Israel's right to self-determination and defense, as recognized by the Christians United for Israel. Whereas Governor Huckabee's extensive experience as a 3-term governor equips him with the skills necessary to navigate the complexities of the diplomacy and foster peace while advocating for the U.S. interests abroad. Whereas Governor Huckabee's background as a Baptist minister provides a unique perspective in the culture and religious dynamics of the region, further strengthening the shared values and deep-rooted connection between the United States and Israel. And that's the resolution.
Thank you, Representative.
Madam Chairman, may I make a motion that we adopt this resolution supporting Mike
There's a
Huckabee,
motion.
Ted Alexander, North Carolina.
Thank you. And we have a second from,
Bill Riley, Kansas.
thank you. Is there any discussion? I just want to make a comment that I've spoken with quite a few people who are in the Jewish community, themselves Jewish and advocates for Israel, and asked them whether or not they thought that it was an issue that there was going to be a Christian ambassador. And they loved the perspective, they loved the camaraderie. They believe it's a necessary component of moving forward, that we be able to recognize that we can, not only that we can work together, but that we're partners in this. So I thank you for bringing this forward. And we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Representative.
Great.
Anything else anybody would like to discuss about Israel? I have one comment that I want to make that people, well, actually two. People are shocked to find out how small Israel is. Everybody says it's the size of New Jersey. Most of us are geographically challenged, and so we don't know how big New Jersey is unless we've been there. So if you're from Michigan, it's the left half of the UP. Now you take the entire population of Michigan and you stick that in the left half of the UP, and you've got a state with the size and population of Israel. But they're not all Jewish. Over 20% are Muslim. So then when you take a look at this and you ask the question nationally, okay, how many Christians are there around the globe? According to Pew Research, there's about 2.2, just a little bit under, 2.2 billion with a B. You ask how many Muslims, these are top 3 religions, how many Muslims are in the globe? According to Pew Research, about 1.8 billion with a B. Now you ask how many Jews there are in the entire globe. 16 million with an M. So I felt it was necessary that we put that in context. Senator Raypert, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yes, Madam Chair, with time, I wanted to make mention, Stuart Garowitz. Stuart, would you stand up in the back of the room? So Stuart Garowitz is here. He's Vice President with Israel Bonds. We do have material out there, laying out there near the registration desk to get some information on that. And I do urge you to speak with him in backing up definitely what Treasurer Sprague has said. And we appreciate them. They actually have sponsored what we're doing here this week. And so please just give Israel Bonds another round of applause for what they're doing and our support for them.
Thank you, Senator. Colleagues, yes, please take that information back to your states, take it back to your local governments, and help them to understand what we're doing and how we're helping, what we can do. Thank you so much for your support of Israel. And seeing that there is no further business, we're going to adjourn early. This committee is adjourned.
All right, members, if you have stuff you want to leave the room, they're not going to clean, so you can, at your own risk, leave what you need. You can leave your name tags on the chairs, and we'll pick this up after lunch. I don't know that lunch is prepared, but you guys, if you would, make sure you head that way and get seated before the program starts. Thanks.